it was super humbling. I just became obsessed with the idea of prospecting, creating a process, inputs equal certain amount of output, because that is kind of what outbound is. It's 80 to 90% process. I became obsessed with making my process as good as possible, ended up doing really well, getting promoted in 10 months to the AE role. Tech is so hard to get into, especially these days. And you just want to take any role that you can possibly get. But if you start off in a crap company that you're never going to hit your numbers, it's going to be hard to get hired again, because everybody is just going to look at your numbers and say, you didn't hit your quota, you got laid off. Turns out it was just a bad culture fit. You and your boss didn't get along. So I really tried to view it as, is this a person I would directly want to work for? Is this a person I would want to interact with on a day-to-day basis? I was blind applying to places, hitting people up on LinkedIn, making videos and sending them places. And I had like mixed success. And it's kind of funny. The job I ended up taking actually ended up being one of the ones that I just kind of blind applied to, which is not usually the way it goes. I never recommend that to anybody. And I was backtracking from what in that industry was an enterprise account management role all the way back to SDR. But if you're ever taking the long game to become an SDR, you can start in sales elsewhere and it'll probably be much easier for you to get a job.
Hey, welcome back to the SDR Hire podcast. I'm your host, Stefan, and if you're new to the channel, this is a place where you can learn from top producing salespeople what it's like working in tech sales, how do you break in, what do companies look for, how to get promoted, and how to be successful in tech sales. And today, we get a chance to talk with Tyler Hickey. So Tyler is someone who went from SDR to account executive in just 10 months. Following a barrage of overachieving his quota, averaging, I think I calculated 129% each month, Tyler was fast-tracked into an account executive role. And these days, Tyler is focused on crushing his two main goals for the year. One, it's to exceed his AE quota for the year, and two, to get in the best cardio shape of his life. So Tyler, dude, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot for having me, Stefan. Excited to be here.
100%, man. So I actually came across you and your content. I think you just recently started posting on LinkedIn, and you immediately grabbed my attention. You were talking about cold emails, which is actually one of my favorite topics. On the other hand, I just saw this. I think you posted it like yesterday or something like that. That these are like two of your goals for the year, which I actually want to ask you about very much. However, before that, let's just go back a couple of steps. And how did you initially end up in tech sales in the first place? I saw that you worked for a manufacturing company, I think, for some while after you graduated, but I'd love to hear that story from you.
Yeah. So essentially, I grew up in a very small town in Wisconsin, ended up going to college and having no idea what I wanted to do, changed my major like 3 times. So when I graduated, I was like, okay, now I need to find a job. So I ended up finding a good job in sales at a company called Modine Manufacturing, which is a old company from like the early 1900s, and it was a great starting point. It was actually a very well-known company around where I grew up, and I was there for 3.5 years and had tons of success. I was the fastest promoted like key account manager in the company. I was in charge of the biggest North American customer. Very farming sort of sales, not really like hunting new leads and everything. So very much like managing customers that already exist, but they were very, very large customers. I did so well at that I decided, okay, I think I'm good at the sales thing, right? So I'm going to try and, bet on myself and move into more of a commission carrying role, more of a hunting sales role. And I, went looking for jobs like that. And I thought tech had the highest potential reward. Also a lot of risk, obviously. Any sales role is going to be like that, but seemed like it had high potential reward. So ended up getting a job at a company called Branch, which is where I am now. Started as an SDR, which was honestly kind of a backtrack in my career. So it was super humbling and it was an amazing experience. I just became obsessed with the idea of prospecting, creating like a process that will produce the results that I want, like inputs equal certain amount of output. Because in the end of the day, that is kind of what outbound is. It's like 80 to 90% process. So I became obsessed with making my process as good as possible. Ended up doing really well and getting promoted in 10 months to the AE role. And there was an element of luck in that as well. It was a weird time where we were really only hiring from within rather than external and whatnot. There was a lot of factors at play. But what I always say, and Jim Collins has a similar thing that he talks about, is you need to get like a return on your luck. And you can only get a return on your luck if you do all the work beforehand. So that's the way I view it. Now I'm an AE. I'm enjoying it. It's a completely different skill set. It's definitely, not easy, but love the learning process and getting better and better every day. So that's the high level of, how I got here.
I love it. It's a great segue into what I wanted to ask you next, which is, what is the difference between the skills that you were honing in your initial like manufacturing company job versus what that looks like at Branch? And I'm asking you this because transitioning from one type of sales roles to tech sales roles is actually a very common topic in the tech sales world. And so maybe you can kind of shed some light on, what was useful from your previous job that you could use, maybe some, transferable skills that you could use as an SDR. And then I'm going to ask you about Branch.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There are a ton of skills that transferred over. The biggest difference between them is just the fact that we had customers that we had pre-existing relationships with, and they were large customers. Like for about 2.5 years, I really only had one customer that I
Mm.
focused on all the time, and it was like a 100-year relationship. So everybody in the company, and this was like a Fortune 500 company, knew who we were. I was able to, talk with pretty much anyone at any time that I needed to. And it was honestly a completely different job when I jumped over to the SDR role because I went from that, basically all the way down the funnel, all the way to the top of the funnel. So I was starting relationships from the beginning, which is something I had never done. But at the same time, you are also upselling people all the time in that role that I was in account management. So you get to understand people pretty well. And, at the end of the day, like the psychological cues that are effective in sales are pretty effective across the board. You have to adjust it from, down the funnel to a top of funnel role. So that's the biggest difference. And it's a huge transition, but at the same time, like if you're good at sales, you can make that transition. Absolutely.
I love that. Really important to understand that there are like sales job is in its fundamentals always the same. However, it is on us to figure out what is a transferable skill that we can then use in our next role. And so, what did that process of becoming part of Branch actually look like? How were you applying for that job? Was it through a referral? Were you just like applying to anything that you could find, or were you more like strategic and you knew kind of what you wanted to get yourself into? Because if I recall correctly, Branch is like an attribution type of software, something like that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, um, I did not have any idea what I was doing at that point.
Fair.
So I was doing a mix of a lot of different things. I was blind applying to places. I was hitting people up on LinkedIn. I was making videos and sending them places, and I had like mixed success. And it's kind of funny. I had, a number of different interviews, a number of different people I talked to, and the job I ended up taking actually ended up being one of the ones that I just kind of blind applied to, which is not usually the way it goes. I never recommend that to anybody. I also got kind of lucky in that I had a lot of very successful sales experience already, and I was backtracking, like I said, from like essentially what in that industry, the manufacturing industry, was like an enterprise account management role, all the way back to SDR. So I had kind of proven my skills in sales. So if you're ever like taking the long game to become an SDR, you can start in sales elsewhere and it'll probably be much easier for you to get a job. So, like I said, I don't think that anyone, like if you're graduating from college and you're looking for an SDR job, like blind applying to a bunch of places isn't going to be your best strategy. It happened to work for me, but again, I had 3.5 years of very successful sales experience.
Exactly. Exactly. Often we hear, especially in the recruitment space, we often hear companies saying, "Oh, you don't have SaaS experience." Now, obviously, that more applies to to folks who are applying for a bit more senior roles. I think the 3.5 years of experience that you had in a manufacturing company made a difference, at least enough of a difference to get you an interview. Now, and this is something I usually talk to my SDRs that I coach. It's like that's where the process actually starts. It doesn't finish there. Like you got a whole job to do to get from the first interview to landing that role. So what did that look like for you?
Yeah. So, just so I understand the question, you're talking about like what did the interview process look like?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So
Okay.
after you landed that interview, what was it like? How many rounds? What were you supposed to do?
Oh man, yeah. How many rounds? The job I got at Branch, I think there were at least 5 or 6 people I talked to.
Hmm.
There was a homework assignment where essentially we got like an opportunity to pitch Branch via email to a specific company. Um, that was probably one of the things that set me apart because I've always been a really good writer. That's always been like a major strength of mine, which is why I do a lot of LinkedIn posts and cold emails these days. Um, because I think that if you can write and you can communicate yourself very clearly, you can stand out because most people don't know how to write. Like it's amazing how powerful that is as a tool. So I think that's what, other than my 3.5 years of successful sales experience, that's what really made me stand out. Like, okay, he knows how to articulate himself well. Like we can clean up things around the edges. Right at that point, I I didn't know all the nooks and crannies of a great cold email, but I had a good voice that was evident in the way I wrote. So I think that was huge. But the rest of the interviews were, kind of normal interviews. And what I always say is you have to also make sure that it's a culture fit for you because, I mean, it's tough because tech is so hard to get into, especially these days. And you just want to take any role that you can possibly get, right? But if you start off in some crap company that makes it so you're never going to hit your numbers, it's going to be hard to get hired again because everybody is just going to look at your numbers and say, okay, you didn't hit your quota. You got laid off for X and X reason. Turns out it was just like a bad culture fit. You and your boss didn't get along, et cetera, et cetera. So I really tried to view it as, okay, each person I'm talking to, is this a person I would directly want to work for? Is this a person I would want to interact with on a day-to-day basis? Even when I interviewed with like the VPs, that's the way I was viewing it. And every conversation I had, I was like, oh, this person's great. Oh, this, and these were different personalities. Some people were a little bit more like humorous, a lot more like playful and whatnot. And then some people were a little bit more serious and whatnot. But I think that if you can see yourself someplace, you're going to have a mix of lots of different kinds of people. And it just seemed like everyone was so genuine. If at the end of the day you see that everyone is genuine, that's a great place to work, in my experience.
God, is that what kind of tipped the scales over for Branch for you? Just feeling that authenticity from your hiring managers and the team that you would work with.
Absolutely, that's the main thing. Authenticity is everything. Like the greatest compliment I can get on my LinkedIn posts is people saying you're very authentic. You're doing this a very authentic way. In my opinion, there's nothing better than that.
100% agreed. By the way, speaking of Branch, let's give a quick overview of the company. What is the product, and then what is the ICP that you're going after?
Yeah, great question. So essentially, what Branch does, there's two pillars. It's deep linking, and attribution. So have you ever clicked on a link in an email, say you bought something on Amazon and you have the Amazon app downloaded, you click on the link and it takes you directly into the app that you already have downloaded?
Yep.
That's what deep linking is, and that's what Branch does. And then we pass back the data to Amazon on how the customer got there. So that's the two pillars of Branch, is the deep linking and attribution. And we specifically operate in a mobile space. So anybody who, any company that has an app. So that's Branch in a nutshell. In terms of ICP, it's a little complicated, but mainly we find success prospecting into people in marketing and people in product, because there's a mix of the attribution information, which is what marketers want to know how their campaigns are going, and then there's the product side, because deep linking is part of the customer experience. So the product team wants to create the greatest customer experience that they can. So in terms of the way I do my outreach, it tends to be, the marketers, I focus more on the attribution piece of it. And then the product, I focus more on the deep linking piece of it. And that's a very simple way of putting it. It's a lot more complicated than that. But those tend to be the main context.
I'm just curious, what is the pain or a problem that you focus on for each? Because I can assume there's a ton of shitty stuff that happens with poor deep linking, broken links. I don't know. Like, what's the pain that you focus on when you reach out to your prospects?
Yeah, there are lots of potential pains. A lot of people have absolutely no idea how successful their marketing campaigns are, or what parts of their campaigns are successful. So that is a huge one.
Mm.
We see people all the time who are just like, we don't know anything about our users, right? Like, that is something that Branch solves for. Like, how can a marketing team be successful when they don't know how their campaigns are doing? So that's a really obvious one. And then the deep linking side of things. So that is essentially just creating the better customer experience for the customer so they don't drop off. The big pain that we're solving for is having a customer drop off because their experience just sucks. And we see that all the time with customers who don't do deep linking, because say you're routed to the web when you already have the app downloaded, you're already logged in the app, right? You already have, if you're a restaurant company, you can tap to app, where essentially something gets added to the cart already within the app. You're already logged in, you have payment information and whatever, and you're ready to go. And if you get sent to the web, none of that exists. It's you're starting from a blank slate. So the drop off rates are insanely higher on the web than they are on the app. So if we can help them create that good customer experience where the customer has the least amount of friction as possible, that is the pain that we're trying to solve for.
That is really cool. I just understood it, and I'm thinking there's an e-commerce store for supplements that I'm using occasionally called iHerb, IHERB, whatever. And so I really think that it happened on a couple of occasions where I actually clicked on a product, whatever, and it was supposed to lead me to the app because I have it on my phone, but it didn't. And so sometimes, I mean, not just with iHerb, but in general, it happens that it doesn't take me to my app, so it prompts me to log in. I don't know my credentials, especially because it opens up a completely new Chrome or a Safari, and so there's nothing saved there, and I do drop off. I do drop off. So there we go. Case proven.
When you work for a company that does that, you notice it everywhere. It's like every link you click is like, oh my God, this doesn't go to the app. Come on.
Put in sequence.
Yeah, exactly.
No, actually, is that something that you do sometimes as well? I don't know, because I'm just getting ideas. Basically, maybe you can have VAs that are just going through websites and just trying out links, and if it doesn't work, you can just add them to the sequence and say, hey, I tried doing this and it didn't work. How are you solving for X? So is that kind of something that you usually do? Like, is that a trigger that you use?
This is a great transition into talking about emails, if we want to go that route. But
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
that is the number one tactic that I use for prospecting via email. So um, for most companies, when you are prospecting, you're essentially making a hypothesis about a pain, right? You're like, saw this, it seems like you may have this problem. We solved this problem. That's kind of the structure of a lot of emails. With Branch, you can literally take a picture to the problem and send it to the prospect. Like you can send the problem to the prospect. Then it's just a matter of, is it a priority to solve the problem,
Yeah.
right? So the main things I look at when I'm prospecting new accounts is, okay, is there a use case? That's essentially the picture I'm taking of the problem. And then is there a business priority to solve that use case? If you have both of those things, this is a very, very viable prospect.
Yep.
So yeah, that's one thing I love about working at Branch is being able to take pictures of the actual problem.
I love that. It's always hard to sell something that you have to describe with words, and like this is the perfect example of how it can be easier in that sense. And yeah, I want to talk about your cold emails. Um, what is so you often talk about cold emails on LinkedIn, at least as far as I saw. Is that like the only channel that you're using, or are you doing multi-channel or and just focusing on email the most?
I am definitely a believer in multi-channel. I consider myself to be a pretty good cold caller. LinkedIn, I need to get better at in terms of outreach. Obviously, I post on there a lot, but in terms of my outreach, it's not as active. Mostly because with LinkedIn, I'm very specific on who I reach out to because it's hard to create like a sequence. You have to send an in mail. You have to a lot of times remember to follow up on there. A lot of people aren't active on LinkedIn. So it's a little bit more nuanced in how I approach LinkedIn, but phone is huge for me. I actually worked with, I don't know if you're familiar with Ryan Reisert.
Of course.
I worked with him for a little while and used his methods to improve my cold calling abilities. And then I ended up, kind of showing my whole team when I was an SDR, kind of what I learned from him. And then the whole team just substantially improved in cold calling. So I am a huge believer in cold calling, obviously a huge believer in cold emails. And then with LinkedIn, I actually tend to send videos more often than I send like regular messages, just because, like I said, I think it's a channel I'm still working on figuring out the best process for.
Mm. How much has your day to day changed now that you're an AE compared to when you were an SDR?
Oh, it's a completely different job.
Is it?
I think, yeah, it's much different. The hardest thing that because I'm a huge atomic habits kind of guy.
Hmm.
So it's like I want to be able to do the same things every day to eventually lead to the result that I'm going to get because those things compound and add up over time. But I mean, I started as an AE mid-October and I'm still trying to figure out what is my best process for prospecting on a daily basis as an AE. Right now, I'm doing like my first hour at work of the day is prospecting, but I'm still trying to figure out, what is the best sequence that I can do for this 1 hour? Like, how many people am I going to add? I am a huge A/B tester, so I'm constantly trying all kinds of different stuff all the time. But I've, deviated between, an hour and a half a day of prospecting midday. I've moved around like crazy trying to figure out the best process. So hopefully, within the next few months, I finally get that nailed down. But the rest of the day, it's a lot of, obviously, meetings with customers and a lot of prep. Like I am an over preparer, for meetings, especially when you're a relatively new AE. You can't just wing things. You have to really, really prep for your calls to make sure that they go well. So a lot of my calendar is blocked off, one for customer meetings, two for prepping for meetings, and then three, meeting with other people around the organization that are having a ton of success and figuring out what they're doing, and then trying to incorporate that into my workflow. So those are the three main things I'm still working on. I am still a new AE, so there are mistakes I make all over the place. There's things I learn every day, but I have a very growth mindset in this role. So hopefully by the time the year ends, I've crushed my quota.
Yeah, hopefully, we'll be cheering you on. No, it sounds like um, you have a very detailed approach to everything that you do because you just try to crush it in every sense possible. And I can see just these activities that you are going through right now. You will be going through them for a while longer, but then once you figure out the right process, the right amount of prospecting versus prep versus customer meetings, I think it's just gonna click, and just like a puzzle, going into the rest of the picture, it's just gonna click and start, creating you a lot more results. But it seems like you don't sound too anxious about whether you're gonna hit your quota. It seems like you're pretty certain. It's just a matter of, is it gonna be October or December?
Yeah, yeah. I feel pretty good about it. I have some great deals in the pipe right now. The way I view it is, there are a lot of things as an AE that end up outside of your control,
Mm.
right? There's timing issues, there's budget issues, and whatnot. So I'm not all that anxious because I know that for the most part right now, I'm doing all the things that I can control that are going to get me to my number. If I don't end up hitting my number, I'm not going to be too upset about it because unless I look back at it like, oh, I could have done this. But that's not really how I tend to approach my job. I tend to put everything 100% I can into it. And then if I don't get the results I wanted at the end of the day, it's like, why be anxious about something that's outside of your control? So that's really all I want to do is I want to put in all of the effort that I possibly can, and make it so there's nothing that I did that made it so I didn't hit my number.
And that is probably the healthiest way of looking at the whole sales role in general. A lot of influential people in the sales space talk exactly about this, and I really love how you like took it in, because like there literally isn't anything you can do for the most part regarding the things that are happening. The only thing that we really can make a difference about is the things that we do. So our inputs, we can always increase the number of activities, we can always try to do things better. So I really love that, and kudos to you, dude. It's really a mature and healthy way of thinking about things. I'm just curious, so it took you, obviously, like, you crushed it for 10 months, you overachieved your quota quite significantly. What was that transition like? Meaning, were you offered a promotion? Did you negotiate a promotion? Were you up for, like, what did that look like?
Yeah. So essentially, what happened is we were in a weird position where tech was in a bit of a downturn last year, as you know, with the crash of Silicon Valley Bank and whatnot. So we ended up not having a ton of openings, and we weren't hiring anyone from the outside when we did have an opening. And the way that we're structured is it's on a regional basis, so east, central, and west. And I was in the central, or I am in the central, and it was only we're mostly based on the coasts. Like both of our offices are on the coast, and we have people in central, but there's no office. So there's only two SDRs in the central. So it was me versus another person, and I ended up winning that role because we weren't hiring from the outside. It ended up just being two people that were going for the role. So that's what I mean when I say at the end of the day, I got kind of lucky, but the only reason why I was able to get that return on my luck is because I was the higher performer going into the interview process and whatnot.
Yeah.
So that's the key at the end of the day is when you end up in a situation where you're like, oh my God, I've only been here for 10 months and I am one of two people that could potentially get promoted here. Like it's nerve wracking, but you got to capitalize it. capitalize on it when you get that chance.
And are there any AEs in addition to yourself in your region, or are you the only one who's taking the meetings that you were booking for the central region?
Yeah, so it's funny. I was actually the SDR for some people in the East region at the
Uh-huh.
time. The SDR team was kind of scattered. It wasn't necessarily focused on a specific region. The AE and the SDR teams were separate. But there are the same amount of people in the central region on the AE team that there are on the coasts. But it's some of the people that are on the central team are actually located on the coast, as confusing as that is. But yeah, so the way that it's that they want to design it going forward, though, is so that those people that are in central are actually based in the central region, which is why I got the opportunity to interview for the position.
Understood. All right. And then, and the reason why I'm asking is a huge topic in our world is this relationship with between SDRs and AEs. And actually, one of the members of my community asked, how did you leverage your, if you did, use the relationship that you had with your AE, and was it useful in your transition to the AE role itself?
Yeah. So my day one AE, his name was Henry. He was a massive influence on me, both as a seller and in my ability to continually promote.
Hmm.
I learned a ton from him. And I think he had some influence internally that was like, hey, you got to promote Tyler. Tyler's awesome. Tyler has been an amazing SDR for me. I could totally see him in the AE role. That's incredibly important. I also had other AEs that I worked with. They shuffled around a little bit more. Henry was the one that was constant for me all the time, so we had a better relationship, I think, than really any of the other AEs I had. But I also had other AEs in my court, not even necessarily ones that I worked with, but ones that I just got to know in my time at Branch. And they would hear things about me like, "Oh, hey, Henry says that you're awesome." Right. And, I would have conversations with them and then they would be like, oh yeah, yeah, no, he is awesome. So, it, it, it sucks, but there is a political game to that promotion. I mean, there's building your internal personal brand as a high performer. I mean,
Exactly.
you need to get to know everybody that you can on the AE team because people talk to people, people ask about others on the team. So when time for that promotion comes from, you want, or in the time that your promotion comes, you want as many people in your court as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well played, man. What can I say? This was really, it's just like I talk about this all the time as well, and I hear a lot of people do as well, which is it's not just enough. Like, you have to be loud, you have to own your victories, and you have to be known as someone who is, a high performer, not necessarily just when it comes to the results that you create. Obviously they count the most, but also the effort and the hustle that you put into getting to those results, because sometimes it's just hard. It's just, you struggle, and you have to overcome that struggle by putting in more effort, by asking questions, by looking for support from other people. And it seems like you did exactly that. So again, kudos, you did an amazing job there. So we're pretty much getting close to the end of the episode, and so we can transition now into the rapid fire questions.
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right, so who is in your mind best SDR creator to follow?
SDR creator to follow. Ooh. I he's an AE, but Brian Lamana is awesome. Everything that
Oh,
he posts, especially regarding prospecting, is amazing. I bought like all of his stuff, and he's helped me a lot.
beautiful. And you also flagged Ryan Reichert as somebody you've trained under,
Yes,
as well as learned a
watch
lot from.
all of Ryan's YouTube videos on cold calling. They're the best YouTube videos that exist on cold calling.
Perfect. All right. Speaking of cold calls, what is your favorite cold call opener? So what do you use to open up your cold calls? Can you give us an example?
Yeah, so I learned this from Ryan actually. So start with a permission-based opener. It's essentially, hey, you weren't expecting my call. It's the first time I've reached you. do you mind if I take a half minute to explain why I called? And you say it like that in that calm voice. You want to say it slow, like you could even say it slower than I just said it. And when they say, yeah, go ahead, say what you want to say. I actually, and again, learned this from Ryan, you ask for the meeting up front. Yeah, so I was just wondering, I was calling because I'd like to find some time on your calendar to introduce my company when I'm not calling you out of the blue like this. So I was wondering if maybe next week you had some time. Um, and to that, the response is typically, well, what do you do?
Mhm.
So essentially, what the goal is you're trying to get the prospect to ask you to pitch them. So it's a very powerful technique. It's very counterintuitive. Most people don't use it, but I learned it from Ryan, and immediately once I started implementing it, my success on cold calls skyrocketed. So give it a shot if you're struggling with your cold call openers these days. Start with the permission-based opener, and then ask for the meeting up front. Again, in that slow voice, in that I don't want to say monotone, but very calm voice, and see what happens because it has driven huge results for me.
That is really cool. Honestly, like I've never tried this. I tried the majority of cold call openers out there. Um, I use the permission based opener as well. But this is a completely new twist to how to do cold call. This is really cool. I'm going to try it out. This is really awesome. I've never done it. All right, cool. So obviously, outside of Ryan Reisert's trainings, like what are some great like tech sales learning resources that you would recommend?
Yeah. Are you talking about specific prospecting or AE stuff as well?
Sure.
Just anything tech
Whatever,
sales?
whatever comes to mind that you would recommend right now.
Yeah. So I would say first off, follow as many tech salespeople on LinkedIn as you possibly can, because then your feed will just be nothing but awesome advice from awesome people. Of course, you got to make sure you're following the awesome people. Don't follow people who aren't awesome. But LinkedIn is the resource, especially it's a free resource. Just giving examples of people to follow on there. Follow Kyle Assay. Follow, I guess he's not in tech sales anymore, but Trent Dressel. Follow Cipriano Martins. Actually, is he and I have been growing together a lot on LinkedIn. He's amazing. I highly recommend following him. Um, I would say that listen to podcasts like this. Listen to 30 Minutes to President's Club. Anything that you can get your hands on from a podcast standpoint. In terms of books, I am right now reading The Jolt Effect, and it is an incredibly eye-opening sales book. I highly recommend that one. Anything that Justin Michael has written is awesome. Anything Jeb Blount writes is awesome. I could go on forever if you let me think, or if you let me think for like 5 or 10 minutes. I could give you 100 resources, because I really think that the most important part of being successful, really in anything, is one, you have to just be obsessed about learning about it.
Mm.
And two, you have to be just as obsessed with working hard and putting in the effort as you are about learning. So if you have those two things, really, you'll be successful at whatever you try to do.
There we go. Perfect. I mean, like you literally took away like a couple of questions that I was going to ask, but that was just perfect. No, that
I'm
was
not
really
good at
good.
rapid fire. I talk too much.
It's all good. I actually this happens a lot. I started asking rapid fire questions, and people just go into these monologues, which is really amazing because we get to learn and hear more things. So that's really good. So the final rapid fire question is: what is your favorite CTA? So a call to action that you would use either in your cold calls or emails.
um, Favorite CTA is this on your radar at all?
Nice.
Not a ton of people use it, but I tend to do it in that scenario where I send a broken experience to prospects. Be like, hey, notice you're not linking from email to your app. Is this on your radar at all?
Nice.
And it works like gangbusters.
Nah, I love it. By the way, my cold email geared brain is has been actually like thinking, how would I actually write this email? And so yeah, one of the things is basically like because you want to figure out whether that's on their radar or not once you show them. So they either already know or they don't know, and you just shed some light on a problem that they weren't even aware of, which should result in higher response rates. So that one is I like that one. Okay, that's pretty cool. All right, so one last thing before we wrap up. So, uh, what would be a message that you would send to SDRs, someone who is maybe trying to break into tech sales right now?
Yeah, the biggest message that I can send is be persistent. Don't let no make you stop,
Hmm.
and be consistent, persistent and consistent. So be persistent and consistently do it over and over and over again. I come back to atomic habits. What you do every day is who you are. So if you want a job in tech sales and you try to get a job in tech sales literally every day over and over and over again, you'll get a job in tech sales. It's just a matter of when, not if. So, and it's the same thing with if you want to book meetings when you're prospecting. If you consistently are persistent, you will have success. So those are the two big things.
All right, consistency and then being persistent. This is really, really impactful for everybody listening, and I think that's the perfect place to leave it at. Tyler, I really appreciate you coming on. Shit, we could have talked more about emails. Doesn't matter. Next time we when we get you on, this was really amazing. I'm going to be following your career, and hopefully you'll crush those sales goals by the end of the year. Obviously, you'll get into your best cardio shape ever. And until then, dude, this was a pleasure. Thank you very much. Keep crushing it and being an inspiration for all of us. I'll see you on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Stefan. Good talking to you today.